The playbook used by Nazi Germany, developed by the chief propaganda minister Goebbels, is in full use today. If there's one thing we need to learn from the Holocaust, is those signposts along the road. And when we see them, we must recognize them.
Lies! No different, my friends, than the lies of the 1930s. Exactly the same, repackaged.
There are hundreds of millions of people who are chanting death to the Jews. Not in 1933, not in 1942, and they were doing it today. And so, my dear friends, this little itsy-bitsy 2-by-nothing country, smaller than the state of New Jersey, needs help.
For the first time, America can believe what they thought was impossible. Here is documentary evidence of sheer mass murder. No words can express the world's disgust at Germany's organized carnage.
What Irving was warning and talking about years ago, when we really thought naively we'd seen the demise of anti-Semitism, and we were starting to see some anti-Semitic sentiments on social media, online, and no one was paying attention. And then the shooting in Pittsburgh happened at the synagogue, and then the shooting in Poway in California happened. And all of a sudden, we began to understand Irving's warning was not just a warning. He had lived the story before. He understood what it meant, that Jew hatred does not remain just in the abstract, in words, but these words drive an ideology that drive people to pick up weapons and harm Jews.
If somebody had said 20 years prior to the Holocaust, this will happen in Germany, most people would have gone, no, that's simply impossible. It's that level of comfort and that idea that no, it can't possibly happen is what allows the laxity to kick in, which then eventually allows evil to really get a foothold and these awful things to happen.
Thousands of men who volunteered to murder men, women, and children. 5 battalions, people who volunteered to do this. And you would think they must have emptied the prisons. That's why you have these people. No, my friends. These were lawyers, they were doctors. These were teachers and pharmacists. Every group represented.
In my lifetime, I have seen the transformation of democracy, of freedom, of equality to dictatorships and murder. I have seen it. I've lived through it.
It's said that before any genocide, what happens is that there's a dehumanization of the other. They're no longer people. They're no longer souls. They are things. They're objects. That's always a horrific sign, and that's what's happening to our Jewish friends now. They're objectified. They're no longer people. They are objects to be attacked.
Look around at the propaganda against Israel and the Jewish people today. Look on social media, look in the news media. Look at how Israel is being portrayed and demonized, and look at how the record levels of physical attacks on Jewish people around the world are growing from that demonization. Look how every year the numbers keep going up. Look at how the propaganda of today resembles the propaganda of Irving's childhood.
What has happened is there is propaganda was created against Israel. And you look at the propaganda, you even look at the posters sometimes, and they're very reminiscent of the posters that took place during the 30s and 40s in Germany. So it is nonsense, but it doesn't matter, because what you do is you point out something and you take things totally out of context and you make it work. And it repeats over and over and over again. It's a mantra, and that mantra is continuously in the newspaper, on the radio, and slowly people begin to identify that as the truth. And today it's identically the same. It's a mantra. Israel is there to destroy the Palestinian people, wants to destroy the Arab world. Nonsense. The Arab world consists of hundreds of millions of people. What are you talking about? Yet, unfortunately, the power of propaganda is poisoning, literally poisoning every aspect.
It starts so much smaller and hidden than you think. It isn't a decision of, at that time it wasn't, do I tell the Gestapo where my Jewish neighbor is hiding? It was, do I do business now with my Jewish neighbor when it's no longer socially acceptable, when they're wearing a yellow star? It was, he wanted people to understand that it started with very small decisions. And then when the big decisions came, they were no longer strong enough to do the right thing. He wanted people to know it started very small and to recognize it now. And this ties in today with a comment from a professor in a classroom. You have that difficult conversation. You, with understanding and compassion, tell the story that Irving shared with you of what it looked like to see this snowball effect that led to the attempted genocide of the Jewish people and how small it began. It's not going to be easy. You're not going to be popular, but look where it leads.
It's 3/4 of a century ago that I arrived in this place, in this type of a vehicle, a cattle car. I was 14 years old and I'm looking around, where is this place? Where am I? On the right-hand side and off to the left-hand side, I see flames coming out of chimneys. And suddenly I'm facing a man in uniform, dressed beautifully, with shiny boots, and a riding crop in his hand. And he says, rechts und links, to the right and to the left. Very soon, I lose sight of my grandfather and grandmother, my aunt, my 10-year-old cousin, because they're going in this direction. 90% are marched towards this end. On your right, on your left, is the remains of the gas chamber crematoria. And no one would march towards their death if they're told so. But they're told they're going to take a shower because after all, they've been in a cattle cart for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, sometimes a week. Men and women are separated. They're told to get down a set of steps into a room. In some rooms, there are hooks on the wall, and some of them even have numbers. And the people are instructed to remember the number where they put their clothing, so when they come back, they should not take somebody else's clothing. It's staged. They simply are told to go through a set of doors, which is a big sign on it, bathhouse. And everyone expects to have some water because there are shower heads in the ceiling. But no water comes out. Through holes in the ceiling comes a material. It looks like crushed marble a little bit, grayish, whitish. And as it descends, it forms a gas, and people can't breathe. People are trying to breathe, but they can't, so they climb on top of each other. The doors are locked. There is a window, which people observe to see the rate of death. And once no one moves, they open up the doors, turn on fans, getting rid of the poison gas, so people can come in, take the bodies and put them on an elevator, one flight up into the crematory ovens. And all that's left of my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, my 10-year-old cousin is ashes. $1.1 million Jews 10% of the Jewish population of all of Europe was brought here in that period of time and murdered. They must be remembered. And in time to come, tell your children about this experience, your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and the hope that mankind will learn from this. Never again shall we build death camps. Never again shall we destroy each other. For this earth was created for us humans. Each one of us entitled to a piece of turf. But there are those by the millions who want to push the Jews into the sea again. Though technology over the past 2,000 years has changed, we think we're different. My friends, what the Romans did 2,000 years ago, what the Babylonians did 2,500 years ago, that those today would like to repeat that evil. And so, as you look upon the situation today, we hope and pray for that not to happen again. Knowing how this happened, the step-by-step I outlined to you, how this took place, how people were transformed from ordinary, God-fearing, church-going, decent, moral people became murderers. That process needs to be understood. Why? Because there are people in the world today who would like to repeat it against the Jews, but there are some people who want to repeat it to many other people. There are those in the world who would like us in America to disappear too. So we need to understand the process. And when we see the first sign of that, then I call that signposts along the road to Auschwitz. Jewish stores have to be marked by a Jewish star with the word Jude. In front of the stores are members of the Nazi party, stormtroopers in uniform with clubs, convincing you shouldn't go in and support these terrible people who are at fault that you don't have a job. And so within a matter of weeks, the first step is boycott. And that is why when 10 years ago the concept of a boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel came along, I screamed and yelled at the top of my voice. That's the first step, guys. Unfortunately, people don't always pay attention, because after all, did the German people stop buying Jewish products? No. So financially, it was not a success. But politically, emotionally, and psychologically, it was the first step and accepted.
Irving would parallel things like, BDS on college campuses, students saying that BDS isn't anti-Semitic, it's just anti-Israel, kind of, doing these like verbal gymnastics to try to hide their anti-Semitism behind other things. Irving would point to that and say, it starts with that, it always starts with that, it always seems small. When you've effectively dehumanized a group of people, the legislation that restricts them, that strips them of their rights, you're more likely to turn a blind eye to it because you already don't care about that group. You already see them as less than human. And so, what's this law? What's that? Like, what does that really matter? It's not a big deal. They're just Jews, because you've already slowly brainwashed them, even if it took a generation of people.
The head of Hezbollah has said that he hopes that we will gather in Israel so he doesn't have to hunt us down globally. For it or against it?
For it.
There's something not quite kosher about this thing, my friends. It's called anti-Semitism.
That's right. That's right.
It's simple, down-to-earth anti-Semitism which has paraded Europe, and the objective is to do exactly the same thing in America. Through the higher education system. Because really, anti-Semitism is really the hatred of Jews. That's what it is. The word was invented in 1879. Because in German, the hatred of Jews used to be called exactly that, Judenhasse. Didn't sound so good, so let's invent anti-Semitism. It is the destruction of the Jews. That's what took place then, and the threat is today to do exactly the same thing.
In one breath, you cannot condemn anti-Semitism and yet condemn Israel. Because if you're condemning Israel, you are condemning the Jewish people. As Pastor Hagee has said, anti-Zionism is a fig leaf for anti-Semitism. You cannot pretend to love the Jewish people, but hate the state of Israel.
Just recently, you saw Jewish people just trying to eat dinner in a sidewalk cafe in Los Angeles. And people walking by found out they were Jewish, and that was all they needed to know. They said, "You're Jewish," and they started to attack them. We're living in a time where in the United States, in England, in France, in places where we thought we would never see this kind of thing, it's happening again, where Jewish people are being attacked simply because they're walking down the street, going about their lives. Someone recognizes them as Jewish and physically attacks them.
There is a deep desire by radicalization into hatred. And that's what people don't seem to understand. It's not a theoretical thing. It's a practical issue of human life. When the president of Iran says, "I will wipe them off the face of the earth," and proceeds to arm to that, when it ships arms to various organizations, terrorist organizations, when the arms are coming in on a ship to Gaza, and Israel intercepts the ship and shows the arms that Iran is shipping to terrorists, they say, "That's a lie." Unfortunately, you repeat it over and over and over again. And that is the issue. The issue has nothing to do with the reality. It has to do with the propaganda.
Iranians broke into chants of death to Israel and death to America while burning the flags of both countries after weekly prayers in Tehran.
The government of Iran is threatening Israel with the Holocaust. Its leaders will tweet out things like the Zionist entity needs to be destroyed, and it's just become, for many people, white noise. People don't even pay attention to it. There are leaders in Rwanda who had suffered a genocide, and they've directly connected what happened with them for the rhetoric they see coming out of Iran. There are people, thankfully, who are concerned about Israel and the Jewish people, and they see these same signs that Irving talked about. And Iran is definitely the most threatening entity when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people.
Look, anti-Semitism is dangerous on any level, from the individual who holds anti-Semitic ideas, from the individual who believes making, anti-Semitic jokes are funny. But then on the national level, it's even more dangerous. And it's that repetition of what we saw in the Second World War. It was a nation state, Nazi Germany, which was able to implement the Holocaust. And today you have Iran, which their very ideology, the very core of their existence is the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. Look, we have a choice. Are we serious about this? Are we serious about never again? Are we serious about ensuring that the Jewish people are never again taken to the brink of annihilation? Or are we just paying lip service? What's more important? To actually take tangible steps and action, or to mourn Jews once they've been murdered?
The second piece of the problem is the fact there are countries who openly tell you the destruction of Israel is one of our primary goals. A year ago, the president of Iran gave a speech in Manhattan at the UN to the UN delegates about the destruction of this apartheid, evil state, which it doesn't even call by name. And the delegates sitting there applaud. That is where we are today. And that is why what Kufa is doing on the college campus is critical. You heard the lies, an apartheid state. Go to Israel. See where the apartheid is. Look for the signs, Jews only, Christians only, Muslims only. Look for the signs. You're going to be there for 100 years, you won't find one. What you will find is at the University of Haifa, 22% of the student population is Muslim. That you will find. You'll find hospitals will take care of every single person who needs it. As a matter of fact, if a terrorist is wounded and not killed, they'll fix him up.
When a mob screams, let's kill, let's get rid of, they mean it. It can be and must be handled right then and there. Do not wait until the scientists and the engineers and the doctors and the lawyers begin to build gas chamber and crematoria.
I think he wanted students to understand that it wasn't monsters. It was businessmen and mothers and people walking down the street with their groceries that let this happen, that didn't say stop when it started to happen in Europe when he was a little boy.
Our Jewish friends say never again. In Kufi, we say not on our watch. We have to be vocal. We have to recognize that praying for the peace of Jerusalem is one thing, but seeking her good and being active is just as important. And we have to see it as our responsibility, not someone else's, not waiting for someone else to do it. We have to. And right where we live, right in our homes, our families, we need to have the conversation and warn people about the dangers and the evils of Jew hatred and how it will consume the world if we don't stand up and be vigilant.
The quote I have from a 5th grader, he said very cleverly and clearly, this 5th grader says, if you stand by and do nothing, you're helping the bad guys. One of the most profound words that I can quote. If you allow lies to be presented as truths, you will be in trouble. And we are. We often say education. But education without a moral compass is this. This too is part of education. And so we must make sure that we begin the educational process from babyhood on. There's a moral compass.
My friends, I beg you, understand what's going on. I beg you. Because what's at stake here is something horrendous. It's up to us to stop this insanity.
Irving had said multiple times that Kufi was extremely important and that he, along with other of our Jewish friends, said that if there was a Kufi during the time of the Holocaust, that maybe things could have turned out differently. So he himself would verbalize his gratitude to Kufi on campus, Kufi in general, the pastors, the staff, and we felt that when he said it. We knew that when he said it, he meant it. Again, what he experienced and saw as a child, he saw the signs of it coming again, and he saw that Kufi would stand against it in a way that didn't happen before.
I consider Kufi to do what the righteous of the nations did. I consider Kufi be doing today what the righteous did 70, 80 years ago. I hope someday every university in America will have a Kufi chapter, because that's the path. Tell the truth.
And so the student body, all of us, must do something. And that is why I'm so thankful to Kufi. Day in and day out, these young people travel all over the country, speaking, organizing, waking up our students to the issues which are involved. And for that, I thank you.
Irving's warning to young people really was examine your heart, because the statistics show that Most people would have done nothing.
How I know what happened? Because I'm an eyewitness to that. And what I want you to do is become eyewitnesses. Because in years to come, I won't be around to tell the story. So I want you to be able to tell the story. That's why I wrote a book. So my plea to you is, prevent it. Please, prevent it.